This is going to be one of those videos where I do not show any images of the man I believe is the Antichrist, or anyone else for that matter. I'm pretty sure that we all need a break from seeing any of that stuff anyway. But what I did want to talk about is something that I've been wondering about recently, and that is why does Donald Trump seem to drive everyone crazy? To his supporters, he drives liberals insane. They're all filled with TDS. And as I mentioned in yesterday's video, there was a move in Minnesota to have TDS classified as an actual mental illness. I think that speaks volumes about who really has the derangement. But to everyone who is against Trump, it's his supporters who are crazy. They are in a cult. And it really is amazing how there is such a divide in the country. There's almost no middle ground when it comes to Donald Trump. One side sees him as a man who tells it like it is. The other side thinks he lies as easily as he breathes. One side sees him as a hero, to such an extent that on two different occasions, those who served in the military and received a Purple Heart gave it to Donald Trump, while the other side sees him not as a hero, but someone who actually tries to destroy those who stand up for what is good and right. For all of us, there's something visceral going on. We all feel Trump deep down in our psyche. Trump brings out both the hatred and the love. Those who are against Trump will often speak about how they hate him so much. To those who are for him, they talk about how much they love him. But why is that? How can one man bring out all of these emotions in people? Opposite emotions. In yesterday's video, I talked a little bit about TDS, and I said it was running wild on the right, starting with patient zero, Donald Trump himself, but it might more accurately be described as TDS on the left and TSD on the right. TSD, of course, standing for the strong delusion. But for that small community of believers who are very disturbed about Donald Trump, we can simply feel how wrong everything is about him. He simply represents everything that is evil, and we can't understand how anyone can support him. He is simply anti-Christ. And the crazy thing is, to his supporters, it's precisely the opposite. Anyone who is against Trump is evil, and they must be destroyed one way or the other. After all, it's God's will. So it's just so mind-blowing how this man resonates on such a deep level with us in completely different ways. Maybe it's a perfect storm of social media and Trump's own willingness to lie about anything in order to glorify himself. But for those of us who see him as the Antichrist, as I do, perhaps the strangest thing is that he is completely the opposite of what we thought the Antichrist might look like. I remember back in the 1990s, when I first started to seriously get interested in Bible prophecy, I always imagined the Antichrist would be a little more smooth on the surface. He would have a secret agenda, but he would present himself as someone who is more capable on the world scene. Not necessarily brilliant, but certainly intelligent. In fact, shortly after 9/11, I even entertained the idea that Dick Cheney could be the Antichrist, which is a pretty good indication of how foolish I was being back then. Dick Cheney matches very few of the biblical descriptions for the Antichrist. But looking at Donald Trump, I see almost the complete opposite of what I was expecting 30 years ago. I see a man who might, at best, have average intelligence. I don't think he is as idiotic as some people think, but he is certainly not a highly intelligent man. He's extraordinarily crude and vile, and his immaturity jumps out of you on a daily basis. But then I started to think about this, and I realized this is the perfect Antichrist. It is someone who is so full of himself that he will literally do or say anything in order to get that glory that he desires. If we remember, there are a couple of Bible verses that talk about Christians being mature in our understanding and of having a sound mind. So it does make perfect sense that the Antichrist would be exactly the opposite of those things. He would be incredibly immature, and rather than having a sound mind, he would be deranged. And Trump's derangement serves him well, as it prompts him to do and say things that no normal person would do. And whereas the Bible talks about us being humble, it makes perfect sense that the Antichrist would be precisely the opposite of that. He would be so over the top full of himself, with an out of control ego, that it again makes perfect sense to be one of the primary traits of the Antichrist. So all of these characteristics that Donald Trump possesses, such as the extraordinary ego, this need to get credit for things and have others glorify him, his willingness to lie at the drop of a hat if it serves him in the goal of promoting himself, and these stunning immaturity all play into his being the perfect Antichrist. And we can toss in the fact that he is such a deceiver that he has convinced millions and millions of Christians that he is a defender of the faith, that he is God's anointed. And yet, every single day that he opens his mouth, he proves that he is just the opposite. So when it comes down to figuring out why Donald Trump drives all of us crazy, to the extent that he has divided families, and lifelong friends no longer even speak to each other because of him, perhaps that's the way it had to be. There had to be a dividing of one side versus the other, of the sheep from the goats. And even though perhaps 20 or 30 years ago, a lot of us wouldn't have anticipated this would be the Antichrist, it turns out that he perfectly fulfills that role. Thanks for taking a few minutes to listen, and I will talk to you guys soon.